Welcome to Spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
AM 1420, WBSM presents Spooky South Coast with your hosts Tim Weisberg and Matt Costa.
Good evening and welcome to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz, broadcasting on WBSM and also on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. And if you were listening on WBSM and Spooky TV just a few seconds ago, you heard what we call the false start. Basically, we started getting ready to go, and all of a sudden, Java, which is what we use to broadcast Spooky TV, just crapped out on us all of a sudden. So I think the computer took it upon itself to update it, but that means that we have the highest possible version of Java available to bring you this program tonight. And we'll talk about the paranormal as we do each and every Saturday night. It's good to be back in the studio here, Matt. You guys cleaned up pretty nice around here last week while we weren't here, Matt Costa.
Oh, yeah, it was kind of a new and different experience.
Well, you had to broadcast the show here with our friend Chris Balzano hosting the show, our content director from Florida. And how did that go when
all the way from Florida? It was like he was right in the room with me.
For a few seconds.
For a little while, yeah.
As long as the Skype worked.
Yeah.
But it was a very good show, what I've heard of it. I still haven't had a chance to listen to the entire show, but you guys did a great job. And you did an awesome job at Haunted History Night in cooking all the food, preparing the turkey dinner for Haunted History Night, which was very nice. So thank you for that. And thank you to everybody who attended. It was a fantastic evening. We had quite a few attendees, and we had some media there covering it, and we had a special guest stop by too.
Yep.
Amy Bruni from Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters just came on by. You know, she's a friend of ours, a friend of Jeff Belanger's, and she knew the event was going on. She wanted to come check it out.
So did Vegan Melissa Segal showed up as well.
So just goes to show you never know who might show up to a Spooky South Coast event. And we do have another event planned, as we announced last night while we were watching Ghost Adventures from the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, which myself and Matt Moniz were on. We did have that brief little cameo. If you missed us, you can go back and watch it again. You'll see Moniz's beard either way, and that beard is something to behold. If you're watching on Spooky TV, you can see it for yourself right there. There you go. But we announced while we were on Ghost Adventures that our Dead of Winter event 2012 will happen on February 25th at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. For just $125, you can come, have dinner, hear some lectures, and investigate the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast with the Spooky Crew and Jeff Belanger. And we're going to have probably even more fun than we had the last time that we had Dead of Winter, because a lot of the people who are coming back are people who went to Haunted History Night. So they're people who kind of have their feet wet now in investigation. There's still plenty of room open for first-time investigators, too, but you've got the chance to really get into the meat of the haunting at Lizzie Borden's. And as you saw in Ghost Adventures, there's some pretty dark stuff going on. But there's only 8 tickets left. We had 25 tickets to sell.
Only 8?
Only 8 remaining.
Left after 24 hours of being for sale.
It's been on for about 25 hours now. Tickets have been for sale, and there's only 8 left. So if you want to get some, you have to get some right away.
Yeah, do it quick.
And if you go to my Facebook, Tim Weisberg on Facebook, that's the easiest place to find the link. It's on ghostvillage.com/lb/deadofwinter.html, or you can go to jeffbelanger.com, and it's on his calendar right on the front page. Down the side, you'll see Dead of Winter. It's been happening so fast, we haven't had a chance to get the link up on SpookySouthCoast.com. But you can get your tickets now. Please do, because as I mentioned, there's only 8 left. And later on during the news break, I'll check my email to see if we've sold some more, because you're running out of chances. There's 2 rooms already gone too. 2 rooms out of the 8 have already been claimed too. So it's $125 for the ticket to the event, and then for an extra $25 a person, you can get a room on the 3rd floor, or for an extra $50 a person, you can get a room on the 2nd floor, and the rooms are on a first come first served basis.
So it's 150 to what, 175?
Yeah, so for $175, you and like a couple of friends, you can have the murder room. The murder room's still open as far as I know. So
And I personally have had some good experiences in that room.
So hurry up and get your tickets. Again, on my Facebook, on jeffbelanger.com, and at ghostvillage.com/lb/deadofwinter.html. So we're hoping we can get the link up on SpookySouthCoast.com, but we may not even have to. It might sell out before the end of the show. All right, well, let's get right into the discussion tonight. We have two authors that are going to be joining us tonight, and they're both going to be talking about different types of books. Our first author has written a fiction story, and our second author is telling a very true story that is amazing about the haunted house where he lived. So we're going to get into all kinds of strange things tonight, just in time for the Halloween holiday, which is coming up on us. So we don't know where it's going to go, really, and that's our favorite kind of show. Joining us now, all the way from across the pond, Wendy Callahan is a dark, urban, and steampunk fantasy author, pagan writer, priestess, green hedge witch, homeschooler, and genealogist from Massachusetts. She is the author of Dead Wrong and the forthcoming books The Gossamer Gate and Heart and Fire. She currently lives in England with her husband, son, and two cats, one of whom is certifiably demonic. And you can keep up with her work at wendycallahan.blogspot.com. And she's joining us now on Skype. How are you tonight, Wendy?
I'm doing really well, although it is morning here. So I've drunk quite a bit of tea in hopes that I don't sound like a zombie on your show.
There you go. And the tea over there is stronger, right?
It's more delicious. I'll tell you that.
Okay. Well, there you go. Well, what's it like, though, having to move from New England to actual England? I mean, what's the differences between where you grew up and where you are now in terms of how it influences your work as a writer?
England is really quaint compared to New England. There's a lot more sheep here, which really doesn't affect my work, actually. But there's gorgeous ruins in many places, and it's just such a beautiful place that you could really look anywhere for inspiration here. It's very green land, very kind of a subtle energy to it compared to back home. I think back home in New England, it's a little more hectic because we have more by way of cities and development and such. And where I live, it's just a tiny little village outside of one of the air bases, and it's very rural. But it's peaceful, it's nice, and it inspires me to just kind of relax and work.
Yeah, but the food is horrible.
Well, Matt Moniz has been out there, so I'm sure he still remembers some of the meals that he was fed.
Only country I've been to that could screw up a pizza.
Well, all the places to get a pizza, why would you risk it?
It was the only thing open.
Okay. That makes
You
sense.
come here for the fish and chips, not the pizza.
Well, that was about the only thing
Actually,
that I found really, really, really good.
He went there for the sheep.
Oh.
What? What?
No, actually, I was there for the
You like
crop
to make
circles.
cotton?
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, of course, though, your book Dead Wrong takes place back here.
Yes, it takes place in Bridgewater, where I grew up.
And it's very interesting because it's a vampire tale, but it's not the typical, the story that we read where it's coming from the human's point of view, kind of the Dracula type stories where, we're seeing through the human's eyes and we're seeing the vampire as the villainous figure. This is a little bit of a twist on that.
It is. It's definitely, it's less of a story about the vampires and it's more a tale of vampire slayer politics gone wrong and how power corrupts.
Well, we know that for sure. But now, when you were putting together this story, I mean, what influences did you draw on to create your vampire society? Because it does have some similarities to some other stories that we've read, but it also takes things in a very different way as well.
Well, actually, the story is inspired by real life events in Bridgewater. We were role-playing. We were playing the game Chill. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's kind of old.
No.
We were playing Chill one night at the comic book store in Bridgewater. Harry Dogs used to be the store where I would just hang out after school. And one evening, as we were playing this game, I was actually looking at my friends who were playing vampire hunters going, wait a second. I could kind of envision these guys in a story. Mm-hmm. And as far as creating the society, I don't know. I just kind of pull stuff right out of my head. When I write, I just kind of write by the seat of my pants. I don't plot out anything like a lot of writers do. So it just sort of happened as far as the society went.
Yeah, I think I can count on one hand the number of times I've ever written a rough draft in my life. But that's, I mean, the good stories, that's how they come. They just flow right out of you.
That's basically how I write, because if I sit and try to overthink everything, I think it's harder to get into a creative flow. Whereas if I just sit and write what's in my head, it comes out and I get pretty much what I'm looking for in that first draft. And then I just kind of go and build on it through the second and third drafts.
Well, but it must be hard, though, to write a vampire story in, today's literary world, because there are so many out there. I mean, in some ways it's good because you have a built-in audience that are looking for these types of stories, but at the same time, you do have to kind of carve out your niche.
That's true, especially with fantasy of any genre, including the subgenres. There's really a smaller group of people looking for that, and I have been rejected because my stories are not romantic enough. I don't write romance. I keep telling people I don't write romance just because I'm a chick. I don't do that.
Well, I have to say, and I'm going to tread carefully here because we are on public airwaves here, but right away, I mean, I start reading the story and I get 2 pages in and I see the C word, of which, I'm a pretty big fan. The male C word, I mean, now. And there's, the fact that pops up on the second page of the story, that kind of lets you know that you're in for something a little bit different than the current vampire stories.
I hope it does. The relationship between the two characters is lust. It's not love. It's more of the main character going, you know what, you're a part of my past. Maybe if I do this, I'll just forget you. And of course, the reader doesn't know that off the bat. I mean, now they do if they buy the book. But I've gotten a lot of credit from readers for the twists and turns the story took, for being a short story. So that makes me happy, where they're like, wait a second, why is this happening? And they get to the end and it all fits. So that pleases me.
It is hard to kind of please everybody when you're putting out a story that is, your own, but at the same time dealing with a genre that people want to read about. I can't imagine what it must have been like for somebody like Stephen King to decide, okay, now I'm going to write a zombie book, now I'm going to write a vampire book, now I'm going to write this, and still be able to stay true to his storytelling. And that's got to be the same thing that you have to deal with, where, you're trying to tell your own story, and you have to kind of not worry about people's preconceived notions about what your characters might be.
I think that not thinking about preconceived notions, but rather just going with your vision is better, because you might get a more original story that way, or come up with a new angle that way. It's really hard to do anything original these days. I certainly never set out to write too many vampire stories because the market is just so oversaturated, and most of my focus is on the steampunk fantasy. But I'm glad that I wrote something that was at least a little different as far as vampires are concerned.
Well, you mentioned steampunk, and that's something that I think a lot of our audience might not be familiar with. Why don't you describe to them what steampunk is all about?
Steampunk is basically that idea of, it's usually set in the Victorian era, and it's that idea that society has actually gone a bit further with technology. While a lot of the stories are based around a society that's developed around steam power, like locomotives and factories and such, it's got that science fiction aspect to it where you can take things a little bit further. You can add these interesting gadgets and such that wouldn't fit into Victorian society as we know it, yet they kind of just add something interesting and new to the story. There's a lot of stories out there, for example, with automatons, just whole armies of men who've been created out of gears and engines, and yet here it is, 1891 England, and you would not see something like that there. And it's fun. Steampunk's a lot of fun because you can play with inventions that would be possible but hadn't been thought of yet.
Think of like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen type movie with a little bit more technical edge.
Yes, that's exactly what it is, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and movies that are very similar to that.
Well, and the good thing, too, about steampunk in this area is, we have a connection to a lot of Victorian era, sites. We have the Victorian Mansion in Gardner. We have Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. We have all these places that are of that era. And it's not really that hard for us to find, junk around here that we can convert into steampunk stuff. So I understand why it's big here, but other parts of the country, and of course we have an international audience. They might not know. So that's just why I kind of wanted to touch upon that a little bit. But it's got to be fun as a writer to write about steampunk, because you can create all these strange things, and it doesn't matter if they never did exist, because they can within the world of your story.
Yeah, just read some Jules Verne, read his stories, and that's kind of the original place where things like these concepts of inventions that quite weren't in their time started. I mean, I love reading all the original sci-fi books, which people maybe won't think of them as sci-fi in that way, but they are.
Now, is one of the things that you touch upon in your writing in the future, have you given any thought to, ghost stories and trying to write true horror? Not true horror, but actual horror.
That's a good question. Back when I was a student at BR, I used to write quite a bit of horror. I would be scribbling in my notebooks about some pretty awful things. I'm not
that you
sure
want to do
if I
to
want
your
to go
teachers,
the horror
probably.
route.
Yeah. Well, I just wonder, because I see that a lot of people who leave this area, they are still kind of haunted by it. And I know that you've actually had some experiences here growing up in the Bridgewater Triangle. I've been hearing about some of these stories that you might have to share with us.
I think the most memorable thing is my father always liked driving the back roads. And I don't know if my sister recalls this story. I was in the passenger seat of the car, and we were driving through the Bridgewater Triangle, and it was nighttime. And this thing, it looked like a cat, and at least it was cat-like, came kind of barreling at the car and whacked its head, charged right into the passenger side wheel. And I was freaking out because I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to kill an animal. The thing just went bounding back into the woods like nothing had happened to it. And I'm looking going, wait a sec, was that real? And I was pretty freaked out because you don't usually see something like that every day. But it didn't seem like it was hurt. And I don't even know if it really existed or what at this point.
And it was a large cat? Like what could you kind of compare it size-wise to another animal?
It was pretty big. As I would say, it was probably the size of maybe like a raccoon or larger. And it just, I don't know, man. I thought we were going to run it over.
What color was it?
That's a good question. This was years and years ago. This is the early 90s.
Well, I mean, it is an area that's known for strange creatures. I mean, there are creatures that exist within the Bridgewater Triangle that might not be seen outside of it. Some of them could just be lost to modern day society, and some of them could just be, some sort of dimensional being that can only exist within the boundaries of the triangle.
Or it could be an exotic pet that got loose. Look at the case of the wallaby that we had in Wareham.
We had a wallaby in Wareham.
Ask Carlson Chops Woods. He was one of the people that had to help wrangle the thing up. People kept saying, we don't have kangaroos or anything like that around here. Somebody had a pet wallaby, and it got loose and was, I think, actually found down in Great Neck.
That's what happens when you let them sell didgeridoos at King Richard's Fair. They start thinking they can have wallabies in their house.
King Richard's Fair.
Well, I mean, we've got some pretty cool things around here like King Richard's Fair, but I mean, I guess being over there, you probably have a little bit more direct connection to the Renaissance. Hello? Still there?
Oh, yep, sorry.
Oh, okay, sorry. We do have the phone line is ringing. We can see if that's a call for you. Good evening. You were on Spooky Southcoast with our guest, Wendy Callahan. No? Okay, maybe not. All right. Good evening. You're on Spooky Southcoast with Wendy Callahan. How are you? Hello? All right, you can just hang that up, Matt. This has been happening all night on that line. All right, if you would like to call in with any questions for Wendy, feel free to do so. 1-877-996-1420 or 508-996-0500. You can also jump in the chat room. You can go to Spooky Southcoast, click on the Spooky TV link, and you'll see the chat room pop up there, along with the in-studio cameras. And you can also email us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com, or text us at 508-444-2661. So plenty of ways to get a hold of us if you have any questions for Wendy. Now, Wendy, there's a story, too, about a haunted spot on an air base in Korea that you spent some time on?
Yes, I lived on Osan Air Base in Korea from 2009 to.
Hello?
It's probably just a little Skype dropout. Still there?
Oop, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sometimes the Skype tends to drop out a little bit. That's what happens when, we're getting thousands of miles out of this connection, so we can't really complain.
I know, right? I'm very grateful for Skype. But if you can hear me okay.
Sure, we can.
Yeah, no, I was living on Osan Air Base. It was 2009 to 2010. I was there for 15 months with my first husband, and which sounds weird because I can't believe I'm on husband number 2. But there's a place on Osan Air Base called Bayonet Hill. It's hill number 180, and a really rather famous battle took place there during the Korean War. It was a hand-to-hand bayonet charge with, hand-to-hand combat and grenades. And there are a lot of spooky happenings on that hill. People have heard whispers. People have been pushed up and down the hill. And I had to walk past it every Saturday night between my apartment and the dorms where I was playing Dungeons and Dragons with my friends. And I had friends who would not walk past that hill with me. We would meet up at the chapel for pagan group and then walk over the dorms to play D&D. And they were like, no, we're not walking past that hill. I used to kind of feel like I was being watched when I walked past it. And this was like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning that I was walking by it. And I was fortunate enough to have one friend who would walk me home quite a bit. But I never really minded walking by it alone, even though I kind of felt like somebody was watching me walk.
Sure, yeah.
So, but it's a pretty creepy area.
Well, and also, didn't you spend some time in a haunted house over here?
Well, let's see. One of my good friends who lives up in Springfield, or he lives up in Wilbraham, rather, his house is quite haunted. My house in Delaware that my first husband and I owned together was definitely haunted. My sister and my awesome nephews and nieces are actually about to move into that house.
What kind of stuff can they expect?
I'm kind of sorry for them.
What can they expect to have happen to them there?
That house, we had just really a few weird little things happen. The 2 back bedrooms doors would kind of open and close on their own. People would see, just shadows passing through there, even if they were alone in the house. So we'll see what happens to April and her kids and her husband while they're there. Hopefully nothing too bad.
I think if anything tries to get too rough, Derek can take care of them. But now that's it. That's interesting, though, because the story we're going to hear about in the second hour from our second guest is about a much darker experience. But it sounds like, nothing was too bad for you to have to endure in that house.
No, it wasn't really bad. And the thing is, a lot of my friends are much more sensitive to spirits and energy than I am. And I always used to kind of complain about that and say, oh, I'm terrible because I can't sense these things. But then if you think about it, if you don't really feel them as strongly, then they can't make you feel like sick or nauseated or anything like that either. Because like I said, I had friends who wouldn't walk past that hill back in Korea because it would make them feel just kind of, out of it. So I guess I'm lucky in a way that I'm so insensitive to that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, I'm telling you, you should definitely start looking into ghosts as subject matter for your books because it seems like you've had some pretty good experience with them. And, I think if you can humanize them the way that you have vampires, it could make for a pretty successful story.
I'll have to think about that. I've got 2 trilogies going on right now, so I'll have to think about adding ghost stories into the mix.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you've been putting these books out. I mean, have these been something that you've been doing on your own?
No, I have 3 different publishers that have been doing it, and they are doing a great job, so I'm happy.
But at the same time, they are going in both the traditional print format and the ebook format, which has got to be great for you because so many more people are accessing these stories through the electronic format these days.
That's true, and I have to admit that I refuse to buy an e-reader, but publishers, both big and small, cannot ignore that e-reader market out there because people are enjoying the convenience of being able to just grab those tiny little gadgets and go, as opposed to like hauling a book to a doctor's appointment, for the waiting room or whatever it may be. So I kind of think ebooks are, I know they're here to stay.
See, my wife's against them because she's very into the feel of a book, the weight of a book, the smell of a book. And I'm kind of the same way, but at the same time, I have to read a lot of books for this show, and I find it's a lot easier when I can just plug them all into the e-reader and just carry one with me all the time. I mean, I've got the entire Stephen King library, like, just on my e-reader.
Not to mention autographs.
That's true. Nobody can really sign an ebook.
That's true. And I've gotten a surprising amount of requests for signed books, and I still have all my books. In fact, the price of hardcovers is really being driven down on Amazon. So since I'm like your wife, I prefer the weight and feel of a book. I mean, I guess you could take an e-reader in the bathtub with you, but it might be kind of dangerous.
Yeah, just don't drop it.
And I just keep... Exactly.
I tend,
so
when I read in the
regular books.
When I read in the tub, I tend to nod off, and then the next thing you know, like, the book is down in the water. So it wouldn't work well with me with my Nook. But
at least an ebook or a book can kind of dry out, and the pages might be okay if you don't mess with it.
So, do you find while you're living there in England, do you find that you want to kind of maybe explore some of their history too, and mix that in with a lot of what you're writing about, or are you just sticking with what you know and keeping things based in Massachusetts?
Well, the book that's coming out at the end of the year, The Gossamer Gate, is based in Massachusetts. It's based in Northampton, but the writing I'm doing now does tend to be set in Britain. The other trilogy I'm working on is set in Victorian Britain, and I do find that I want to write about this place. It's really pretty. It's nothing I've ever seen before, so I enjoy being able to go outside and look at a house and, describe it accurately, because here I am. So yeah, I do find that the location where I live does influence, the writing.
All right, I think we're going to try this phone line again. Hopefully it's a call for you. We'll see. And if it is, we may have to relay the question to you. Good evening, you're on Spooky South Coast with Wendy Callahan. Do you have a question? Okay, we're just not going to answer that line again when it rings tonight.
Nobody wants to talk to me.
Oh, well, what it is sometimes, people are calling in and they don't realize, what the show is, and they're probably calling for some other reason or to talk about something else, so they're just waiting for the subject to change. But we're here to talk about the paranormal all the way to midnight, so you're kind of stuck. One thing I want to ask you about is it says in your bio that you're a green hedge witch. What exactly is that?
Well, I'm pagan. I pretty much grew up that way. A green witch specifically is somebody who tends to work with the earth versus doing more ceremonial magic like Wiccans do.
Okay, so I mean it's the way that you grew up too. I mean, you've been pagan throughout your life?
Pretty much. My father is fairly agnostic and my mom wasn't in the picture, so nobody was telling me what to believe or what to think. I actually didn't know what Christianity was until I was about 18. And I said to my father one day, I want to be a witch. And he went out, bought me my first Scott Cunningham book. And I said, yep, this is right. And I've just been doing it ever since.
Now, what about your sister? Were you able to convince her to stay pagan or to stick with pagan beliefs?
April is, she does her own thing. Our family isn't super pushy about religion or anything. Is that what you just asked?
Yeah.
About my sister?
Yeah, because...
or did I get the sound wrong?
No. I should disclose here that I went to high school with your sister and with her husband. So when she first mentioned online that you had written this story, I said, well, there's somebody who fits in with the theme of our show and the kind of things that we talk about all the time and would be an interesting guest to talk to for our listeners. But at the same time, it makes me step back and think about how, it's kind of all come together for us. It's kind of weird how so many parts of our lives here, the three of us hosting this show, have been touched in a way that it all comes back to what we're doing now. And I guess being pagan, you would believe that's kind of how things work.
Yeah, I do believe to some extent in fate and things kind of just working out. I mean, I honestly never expected to get divorced and remarried in the span of a week. But I met somebody in Korea, fell in love, and I never expected to marry two guys in the Air Force. I never expected to live in England, which is where I always wanted to live. But, well, when I was married to my first husband, he was debating going back on active duty in the Air Force. He was in the reserves at the time when we got married in 1993. And he said, you understand that if I go back on active duty, I'll have to get deployed. I may have to do 1 year remote away from you. And I said, as long as I have a baby. He got back in the Air Force in 1999 on active duty. We moved to Dover, Delaware. We lived there for 10 years. And I got pregnant with my son in the beginning of 2002. And a month after we found out I was pregnant, he found out he was going to Korea the following year. And he said, wait a minute, you said you wouldn't mind if I went away for a year as long as you had a baby. And I said, see how that works?
Well, I mean, but everybody's on a certain path, and it seems like your path has led to the creation of these stories and being able to share them with people. Have you been getting a lot of response from readers?
Yeah, I have a lot of people who like the story, but they wish it was longer.
Well, I mean, that's the challenge, though. The challenge is to find exactly where you've told enough of the story and then have them come back wanting more. So it sounds like you found just the right hook to try to get them to come back and read more of some of the adventures.
I hope so, and I may or may not make a longer story or write a series on these characters. We will see. It depends on how many more people pester me about it.
And it's kind of like one of those things where if the character feels like there's more story to be told, then you'll know it. That's
how I feel. I feel like writing it's inspiration. Like we were talking about earlier, I don't plot it out. If it comes to me, I just do it.
All right. Well, we definitely wish you luck in all your future writing and all your future endeavors. And everybody can follow along at wendycallahan.blogspot.com. And that's where you can find it. Can you purchase the book from there? I know you can get it from Amazon.
That's correct. You can also get it directly from the publisher, Damnation Books. And if you get it from the publisher, they have all the different e-reader formats. You can get it on Amazon for Kindle or in paperback.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to let you go and get to bed now because it's much.
Yes,
it's early actually.
4 a.m.
Yeah. So get some rest, and then you can start cranking out some more stories.
That's definitely going to happen.
All right. Thank you so much,
Thank
Wendy.
You so much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a great night.
You too. All right. Why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, I'm going to tell you some more about some more upcoming Halloween events that are happening in the area that you can check out. And then coming up in hour number 2, we'll talk with Patrick Meechan about his book, 225th Street. This is going to be about the true haunting that he experienced. And you're not going to believe this story when you hear it, but it actually happened to him. And it's what he had to endure. I wouldn't wish on anybody. Imagine living in back-to-back homes infested with the demonic. So we'll have all that and more coming up in just a few minutes here in Spooky South Coast.
AM 1420, WBSM, is proud to be part of one of the single biggest events to help fill the Red Cross food pantries. Cans Across the Park is Saturday, November 19th at Buttonwood Park in New Bedford. Last year, we lined up canned food items across the park and back again. We want to do even better this year as the need has grown. Join us on November 19th with as many non-perishable food items as you can donate. It does so much for so many of our neighbors. We thank our partners, Mechanics Cooperative Bank, Jose Costello Real Estate, CNR Enterprises, Pharma Health, and Advanced Financial Group for joining us in Cans Across the Park with the American Red Cross and AM 1420 WBSM.
Scam artists are trying to trick seniors into giving them their Medicare numbers.
I heard that. This happened to my friend. A man came to her door wanting to sign her up for the new Medicare program. Well, when she got her Medicare summary notice, it was full of charges for services she hadn't received. So I did something about it. I joined the Senior Medicare Patrol, where I teach others to protect their Medicare numbers, review statements to spot false charges, and report fraud.
Call 800-892-0890 or visit stopmedicarefraud.gov.
name's Bob. Hi, Bob. I see this ad on TV. Says I can reduce my debt by 50%. I call. They told me to stop paying my bills, stop talking to my creditors. They'd take care of everything.
I gave them thousands, but most of it went to their fees.
Getting out of debt is neither quick nor easy. There are those who will tell you anything to win your trust.
I'm more in debt now because the fees and interest on my cards kept piling up.
Talk to your creditors directly, or to find a nonprofit agency near you, visit debtadvice.org. This has been a public service message.
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky South Coast is back.
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. Remember, if you want to get your tickets to Dead of Winter 2012, it's happening February 25th at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. Last I checked, there were only 8 left out of the 25 that went on sale last night. So go to my Facebook page or go to jeffbelanger.com or ghostvillage.com/lb/deadofwinter.html to grab those tickets. But there are a couple other Halloween-type events that I want to tell everybody about as we get closer here to the holiday. There's going to be all kinds of cool things happening. And something that is happening next weekend is something I'm going to be attending, the Ghost Train at Edaville Railroad. It's on October 29th and 30th at 5:30 p.m., 6 p.m., and 8 p.m. Tickets are $13 a person and are available on edaville.com. But here's what they have to say. Something seriously strange is going on out in the bogs at night, and we're inviting the public to experience Edaville's all-too-real ghost story in the first ever after-hours excursion. Take a 40-minute train ride deep into the park's far reaches on rails we haven't run for years. On the way, learn about Edaville's enigmatic founder, sorry, I don't know why I'm stumbling over that, Carver's own Willy Wonka of trains, and his evidently enduring connection to these cranberry bogs he eventually died in. We'll get to that in a second, Moniz. Hold on. Mm-hmm. The park and all amusement rides will be closed for the ghost train, so just come for the train ride. Please leave the young kids at home. Since we're not sure what you'll encounter out there from night to night, we can't guarantee anyone's safety. So it's ages 8 and up, and under 14 must be accompanied by an adult. But again, that's the 29th and the 30th, 5:30 p.m., 6 p.m., 8 p.m., $13 a person at Edaville. I'm working on a story on this for the Standard Time, so I will talk to them about where they are mentioning that Ellis Atwood died in the cranberry bogs, and we know that that's not true. Yeah. From what we've been told. It actually happened in the boiler room of the what is now the museum. But we'll talk a little bit more, hopefully, about that next week after I've had a chance to speak with the people from Edaville. Something else I want to let you know about, the Village PTA in Wareham. They're having a Halloween pancake breakfast on October 30th. That's next Sunday from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. at the Elks Lodge in Wareham. Pancakes, breakfast meats, coffee, juice, milk, $4 a person. Only $4 a person. That's cheaper than the one that you guys had over at the Masonic Lodge there the other day. Yep. And $15 for a family. Costume contest for the kids, prizes, and other activities. Information or questions should be directed to Jennifer Weisberg at jennifer_grawl@yahoo.com. Or you can get a hold of me. Just email me, Tim at SpookySouthCoast.com, and I can give you more of the information as well. But again, that's next Sunday, October 30th from 9 a.m. to 11:30 p.m. at the Elks Lodge in Wareham. Just $4 a person, $15 for a family. We have about 2.5 minutes before the news break here, Moniz. But one thing that I did want to mention is when we were at Haunted History Night on last Saturday night, when we have everybody that's excited to come and investigate the Fearing Tavern, which they'd been hearing so much about, but we also had 3 buildings that had never been investigated before. The Old Methodist Meeting House, the Union Chapel, and the one-room schoolhouse. And at 11 o'clock, when we had our break, Moniz comes right up to me and pulls me aside and says, "Dude, that one-room schoolhouse is really haunted."
It actually was. What was interesting is I had never been in the building before. I didn't really know much more of its history than it was a one-room schoolhouse that used to be out on Great Neck, I believe.
Yeah, it was out on Great Neck Road. Yep.
Great Neck Road, and they moved it and the church, actually the Methodist church there, because they were built in the 1800s and they were in peril of being lost in the Martian Sea, and they thank God the town took the foresight to move them, because they are pretty...
And now they're all right in that little lot with the meeting house.
Yep. And
so what was happening in that schoolhouse?
Well, what was interesting is it wasn't just a schoolhouse as things were back in the day in small towns. They would have multi-service things in the building. It wasn't just a school, it was also the post office. And a guy in the first group was sitting there. He's like, all of a sudden, he's like hearing what sounds like somebody, doing a rubber stamp type thing. And the docent said, yeah, there used to be the post office in there. And then second group comes in, hey, I just saw somebody moving in that room. And it's like there was activity going on in there all night.
Well, coming up in the second hour, I'll tell you a little bit about some of the strange things that was happening in the Fearing Tavern, which is where I was stationed all night, including our friend from Lizzie Borden's talking to me a little bit. So we'll get into that. And we'll also be joined by our guest for the second hour, Patrick Meechan, about his book 225th Street, the true story of the haunting that he had to endure when he lived at 225th Street. So we'll talk about all that and more coming up in hour number 2 as we inch ever closer to the Halloween holiday. Stay tuned for more here on Spooky South Coast, coming up after the news.
For AM 1420, WBSM, a Cumulus station.
News. I'm Chuck Sievertson. It's wrapped up in the past hour. The conservative parade of Republican presidential hopefuls, 6 of them speaking at a conservative evangelical Christian forum in Des Moines, Iowa, an important Iowa voting bloc. Last to speak, Rick Santorum.
What's going on in Iraq right now is that we are losing the battle to Iran. They will be stronger when we leave. They are strong now. That's why we can't get a deal with them. That's why we can't protect our soldiers.
Before him, Texas Congressman Ron Paul.
Why don't we get Roe versus Wade repealed by removing the jurisdiction of all these issues from the federal courts? That's what we need to do.
Also, Michelle Bachmann, Herman Cain, Newt Gingrich, and Rick Perry spoke about those candidates who don't want the government to intervene in abortion.
If that is your view, you are not pro-life. You are pro having your cake and eating it too.
The forum was organized by a group founded by veteran evangelical political activist Ralph Reed. Skipping the event, Mitt Romney and John Huntsman. The U.S. Embassy in Nairobi, Kenya says they have credible evidence that an attack in Kenya by an al-Qaeda-linked group is imminent. ABC News senior justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
The concern is about Kenyan facilities in areas where foreigners are known to congregate, such as malls and nightclubs. U.S. officials are taking the threat seriously because al-Shabaab is thought to have operatives in Kenya that could conduct an attack.
Scientists say any time now pieces of a doomed German space satellite are expected to fall to Earth. Most of the minivan-sized satellite is expected to break up and burn up on re-entry, but up to 30 pieces could strike terra firma. It speeds up to 280 miles an hour, but they don't know exactly where or when. Libya's new leaders say they plan to officially declare the country liberated tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock Eastern Time, as some of these rebel fighters return to the city of Misrata, kissing the ground and praying. You're listening to ABC News.
Hey, it's Mike Rowe talking about the Big Tire event with Fiona, who works at a Ford dealership. How are you, Fiona?
I'm good, thank you.
What makes the Big Tire event big?
Everything.
Selection?
Big.
Rebates?
Big.
Savings?
Big.
It's big all around.
All around, it's big.
It's so large, in fact, that the announcer should take it from here.
Buy 4 select tires, get a $100 rebate, and that's on top of the low price tire guarantee.
All right, well, there it is. It's a Big Tire event, and everything about it is
big.
Competitors ad required for tire guarantee. Stop by any participating Ford dealer or visit FordOwner.com for rebate details through 11/30/11.
Can you get all-day pain relief without taking pills? Yes, with Thermacare heat wraps. Over 8 hours, Thermacare is more effective for back pain than the maximum dose of acetaminophen, the medicine, and Tylenol. No pills, no pain, just relief. And for joint or arthritis pain, try Thermacare in the red box. Just one Thermacare provides all-day arthritis pain relief to soothe joints, improve flexibility, and get you moving again. Look in this Sunday's paper for a $1 off coupon. Use as directed.
More violent protests in Europe. ABC's Linda Albin at our foreign desk in London.
As European finance ministers reportedly made progress on a plan to keep Europe from default and protect investors, demonstrators protesting against the powers of big banks took to the streets in Germany. In Berlin, there were clashes with police by the Brandenburg Gate. But in Madrid, where teachers and parents protested against education cuts, there was a carnival atmosphere. But the message was clear. As one placard read, "Our hopes for the future were never more gloomy." Linda Albin, ABC News.
More is leaking out from the biography of Steve Jobs, which hits bookstores Monday, from 40 interviews with his authorized biographer.
The tech giant was livid over Google's efforts to copy the iPhone with its Android software. And Jobs remained committed to spending his last dying breath to right this wrong. adding that he was going to destroy Android because it's a stolen product.
And, says ABC's Ron Claiborne,
Jobs also complained about rock star John Mayer, praising the guitar virtuoso, but bemoaned that Mayer was out of control and, in his words, blowing it big time. The book reportedly does not say why Jobs felt that way.
A federal judge says a lawsuit can go forward as sugar makers seek to stop the corn industry's use of the term corn sugar for high fructose corn syrup, a branding effort the sugar industry claims is false advertising. This is ABC News.
Does your roof need replacing, your house need cleaning, or maybe you're ready to update your kitchen? Big or small, whatever your home improvement need, log on to home.servicemagic.com. ServiceMagic is a free online resource with instant access to pre-screened remodelers, maids, handymen, painters, and many other home contractors. It's easy and it's free. Just go to home.servicemagic.com. home.servicemagic.com. That's home.servicemagic.com.
Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
I'm working 2 jobs, and my husband works too. My kids go to school with your kids. I sit next to you at PTA meetings. We live right next door. We've been neighbors for years. You know my family and me pretty well, but here's one thing you don't know. I'm 1 out of every 6 Americans, and my family is struggling with hunger. Like you, we believe in this country. What's hard to believe is in the land of milk and honey, how many hardworking Americans have to choose between paying bills and feeding their families. This is a problem with a solution. Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 7 meals for those around you quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we're Feeding America.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The NFL is back, and so are the Patriots. You'll hear every game and every play right here on AM 1420 WBSM.
Fires to the end zone, leaping catch, touchdown!
Coach Belichick and Tom Brady have the team ready to take on the Jets, Ravens, Steelers, Colts, and the rest of the NFL. Patriots football is presented by Southern Mass Credit Union, the Oaks Nursing Center, Tarkill Hill Car Wash, C&R Enterprises, and by ABC Disposal Service on AM 1420 WBSM.
Unfortunately, many people facing foreclosure believe they're on a one-way street.
How did I end up here?
Please take next exit.
What? But there is no exit.
It may not seem that way now, but I'm giving you the right directions to help you save your home from foreclosure.
Okay, talking to my GPS. I must really need help.
Facing foreclosure alone is stressful. That's why you need advice from a HUD-approved housing counselor. They offer expert, trustworthy advice that might help you avoid foreclosure no matter how difficult the situation seems.
It's difficult, all right.
And best of all, the advice is free.
Wow.
Now please exit this road you've been on for far too long.
Facing foreclosure? Don't go it alone. Get the right directions from a HUD-approved housing counselor today. For more information, visit www.hud.gov/fairhousing. That's hud.gov/fairhousing.
A public service message from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
The cat population at Forever Paws Animal Shelter at 300 Linwood Street in Fall River has become overwhelming. They need your help to reduce the population. Currently, they're having an overcrowded cat adoption sale on all cats that have been at the shelter for a year or longer. Their regular adoption fee of $100 has been reduced to $30 for all cats that fall into this category. Now, the price includes neuter spay, rabies, distemper vaccines, and feline leukemia testing. This large selection of cats includes all type of personalities and colors. Bring some additional joy to your home with a new feline buddy. The cold weather's approaching, and how relaxing it is to have a warm, snuggly cat curled up in your lap. Are you willing to open up your heart and home? These cats have been waiting long enough for their forever home. Come visit them today. For more information, call the shelter at 508-677-9154 or visit their website at foreverpaws.com.
My name is Sue Smith. I'm 38 years old, and I work at a graphic design company, which is funny, because I couldn't even draw a stick figure when I was a kid. But I met someone who told me, you know what? You can do anything if you really want to. And if the teenage me were here, she'd tell you,
I wouldn't be into drawing and art if it wasn't for big brothers, big sisters. Most kids from my neighborhood don't get into art. They get into trouble. But I was lucky because my big sister showed me early on that I didn't have to be like most people. And to the young me,
that meant a lot. My big sister's name is Sheila, and Sheila is the reason that this 8-year-old grows up to have an amazing job as a graphic designer.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child, and that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
The following takes place between 11 p.m. and 12 a.m.
Hold your breath. This is usually the part when people start screaming.
Turn on all your lights, lock the doors, and pull down the shades. Spooky Southcoast is back.
I can smell your fear. I'm not afraid. You will be. Welcome to Spooky Southcoast.
Look, I know the supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does it.
All right, welcome back. Hour number 2 of Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz. And we are broadcasting on Spooky TV as well as on WBSM. You can go to SpookySouthcoast.com if you want to see our ugly mugs. And that's really the way to go, because, you know, if you want a good Halloween fright, these cameras are the ones that are going to do it. But before we get into it with our second guest of the evening, Patrick Meechan, about his book, 225th Street, we're going to talk a little bit more about what went on at Haunted History Night last Saturday night, because I had pretty interesting experiences that were happening in the Fearing Tavern with the different groups that were coming in. Now, we did it like one of our usual events. We broke down into small groups and we rotated, from building to building. And each time there was a group in the tavern itself, and I'm talking in the tavern part of the Fearing Tavern, we were conducting some ghost box sessions. And we were talking with these spirits, and we kept asking them why they were there. And every time we made a connection with something that kept coming back with answers, we asked why they were there. It would say dead. So, okay, that's pretty interesting. Then at another instance, we had a woman who made a connection with her father-in-law who had passed away stepfather who had passed away not that long ago. And he was saying something to her over the device. And then we brought in spirit medium Tiffany Rice. She was on another floor at the time, but we brought her down and had her give a reading right away to see if the spirit was still there. And she was actually able to come up, pretty much verify exactly what was being said over the box just a few minutes before, which was really cool. And then things took a little bit of a dark turn. At one point, I was talking to a spirit supposedly over this device, and I said to her, what is your purpose here? And it comes back saying evil. All right. And it kept referring to me by name. It kept saying Tim. So I was like, do I know you from somewhere? You're not from here, are you? Where do I know you from? And it came through and it said, Lizzie's. So I said, all right, listen, you don't belong here. This isn't where you belong. So I turned off the box. I ended that session. But it just goes to show that whatever it is that Lizzie Boyden can apparently reach out and touch someone through these devices. So that's just one of the things that you might have to endure if you buy a ticket to Dead of Winter 2012. which are on sale now. But it's definitely strange that this thing reached out, and it was at a time when there wasn't a lot of people around during this session. There was only a few people around, so it kind of like knew just the right time to get me. But we did have some cool stuff happening. We had a lot of people with personal experiences. There are some evidence photos and EVP clips and things rolling in. And eventually we're going to just have to do an episode, I think, where we start going over a lot of this stuff, because a lot of it is very intriguing. If you did attend and you have some evidence that you want to share with us, just email it to us, spookycrew@spookysouthcoast.com, because the Wareham Historical Society, who are very pleased with not only the money that we helped them raise, but also the character and the behavior of everybody that was attending the event. They want to have everybody back to share their findings with the general body of the Historical Society. So I'm not bragging here, but we made more for them last Saturday night than they made all summer doing tours of the Fearing Tavern, and that makes me feel good.
That makes me feel real good. We have a great core of people that come to these things.
And we thank them all, it's not just that they come, but they want to come again and again to all of our events. So we're going to keep trying to put on, what we hope are top-notch events, as long as you're willing to keep enduring listening to us, because it gets boring listening to us all the time. Jeff's always great, but
this also was a great inroad with the Historic Society, because they're now going to be opening up even more buildings that are under their control to us, places that have never had investigations as well. And to me, that's what I live for, is being able to get into a place for the first time to be able to investigate it myself. Nobody else has been there, so I'm new territory, new digs. I can get into that.
We have probably 10 different places that have contacted us about possibly doing events there. And I said, well, gee, I don't know. We don't really want to oversaturate things. We don't want to be doing too much of this, because we don't want people to get sick of us saying all the time, hey, come spend money to come hang out with us. But that's not what it is. I mean, we're doing these as fundraisers for the show, which we don't get paid for, and also for these places which are having us.
Well, the other thing, we also keep the prices that we do these things for at a very reasonable level. A lot of people have been to these things before, and they've said, we definitely put on the biggest bang for the buck. I mean, the food alone is what most people can't stop talking about. Never mind the opportunities we give them versus what they paid for. It's like I've known people that went to other well-known events for much, much more money and got far less.
Well, the prices might be raised on our event soon, just so we can fly up Chris Balzano from Florida. We're going to start charging $300 a ticket just so we can bring up Chris Balzano. No, but in all seriousness, tickets are $125 for Dead of Winter, so if you want to get those, definitely do that now. Why don't we take one last break for tonight? While we're doing that, we'll get our next guest on the phone, Patrick Meechan, and we'll talk about 225th Street. The experiences that he endured there are going to make it very hard for you to sleep tonight. I promise. So stay tuned. We'll be right back with more here on Spooky South Coast.
I see a great need in my community.
So Richard Washington set out to meet that need by working with youth in the juvenile justice system, joining thousands of other volunteers. If you're 55 and older, you can use the skills that help you through a lifetime of learning, giving, teaching, and working. Go to getinvolved.gov or call 1-800-424-8867 to find out how you can volunteer, impact your community, and make our country stronger.
Retired people have a lot to offer because we have life experience.
What are you going to do with your lifetime of experience? Go to getinvolved.gov today or call 1-800-424-8867. We have so much to offer, and our nation needs us. Make a difference for generations. This message is brought to you by the Corporation for National and Community Service.
This heavyweight bout is about to begin. The challenger wears white trunks with a blue stripe, and the champ is wearing, looks like an examination gown from the doctor's office. And from the back we can... Ooh, that's not pretty. Champ, what's with the crazy getup?
I've got to take care of my family.
Yeah, so?
Well, when you love your family, you got to go in and get those important medical screenings. A lot of potentially deadly diseases can be treated if you catch them in time.
So you wear the examination gown because...
Because I'm a real man. Real men take care of their families and get those tests. Real men wear gowns.
Okay, champ, good luck. Here we go. The champ's not wasting any time. It's over. This fight is over. Champ, you barely broke a sweat. Any words for your fans out there?
Remember, go to ahrq.gov for a list of the tests they need to get and when to get them.
What was that web address again?
ahrq.gov. And remember, real men wear gowns.
Go to ahrq.gov. This message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, AHRQ, and the Ad Council.
This is the story of Daniel, who was born 2 months early. His lungs weren't ready. His heart wasn't ready. His parents could only hope that one day he would leave the hospital healthy, and they would all live happily ever after. Daniel's is just one of the more than 500,000 stories of babies born prematurely last year. You can help the March of Dimes stop premature birth and bring more babies home healthy. Learn how at marchofdimes.com. Working together for stronger, healthier babies.
We are the shadow mental health system in America, unheralded and unsung.
Dr. Joyce Berland of the National Alliance on Mental Illness says that families provide 50% of the care for people with mental illness.
And the families are the ones that are, taking to medication, taking to this, taking to that, going after their family members in jail, trying to get them out of jail. It's a real firing line that families live.
Many times, families feel isolated.
Support groups have been spontaneous reactions.
Hello? Yes, I'm sorry if I missed your call the first time. I called you back just in case I had missed anything. Yeah, sounds good. Mm-hmm. Okay. 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 Thank you. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Of time.
You can give any skill you have.
I see a great need in my community.
Just imagine how strong a society we could be.
This is Barack Obama. Every one of us has a role to play in making our communities and our country stronger. Discover yours. Help us continue to make a difference in the life of our nation. Go to serve.gov and find the opportunity that works for you. And this message is brought to you by the Corporation for National and Community Service.
Major League Baseball players are getting in on the action.
Hi, I'm Michael Young.
I'm Chris Young. I'm Carlos Pena. And we're getting in on the action.
Thousands of high school students across the country are getting in on the action by volunteering in their communities.
Action teams of high school students are joining Volunteers of America and Major League Baseball players to help train and inspire the next generation of volunteers.
It's easy to start an action team at your school, so you too can get in on the action. Are you in?
Log on to actionteam.org. Are you in?
It's funny, isn't it? How everybody in town's afraid of you.
What's gonna happen tomorrow is gonna happen, and all your worry in the world isn't gonna change that.
Spooky South Coast is back.
All right, welcome back to Spooky South Coast. Tim Weisberg, along with the silent assassin Matt Costa and science advisor Matt Moniz, broadcasting on WBSM and on Spooky TV at SpookySouthCoast.com. And we are joined now on the phone by, well, actually via Skype, with Patrick Meechan, the author of 225th Street. He's had the unique experience of living in two consecutive yet unrelated haunted houses. 225th Street is the second of those houses. His book details not only his own personal experiences during the 3 months he lived there, but also his in-depth investigation of the history of the house and haunt. The book is true to real life and contains no Hollywood hype. It's a haunted house story of truly biblical proportions. And the second book, which we'll talk about too during the course of the discussion, is Nightmare in Holmes County. That's due out in 2012. It's the prequel to 225th Street. And you can get these books at crownofthornspublishing.com, and the Kindle versions are available at amazon.com. But now Patrick joins us on the phone. Good evening, Patrick. How are you?
Good evening. I'm doing great. How are you?
Oh, we are spooktacular, as we say here. Now, I was reading the story, and I got to tell you, it it definitely sounds like you had kind of, I don't want to say you hit the lottery when it comes to getting demonically infested houses here.
Yeah.
Because two back-to-back, I mean, the fact that you came out of this still not only with your sanity but a stronger person, to me, is amazing.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I was a little bit better equipped for 225th Street. Thank God, because when I got in there and realized what was really going on, I had been through it once already, and I was able to protect myself and basically endure that environment for the 3 months I was there. But I'll tell you, it was not a pleasant experience at all.
Well, when you first open the book 225th Street, you're talking about moving into the second of these two haunted houses, and you're coming at it from a perspective where you're already you have some degree of discernment, as you believe, and you also are pretty well versed in how to deal with these haunts. But what was it like for you when you underwent it the first time? Were you already aware of the paranormal? Had you already been studying these kind of things, or did you come into it as a result of having to deal with that first haunting?
Yeah, it was definitely as a result of the first haunting. I've always believed in the paranormal. I've always known, there's stuff that we cannot explain. I believe in the Bible, so I believe in evil spirits and angels and God and Satan and all those, things. But I never would have dreamed I was going to actually be found myself in. So like I said, I had this belief in it. I knew it was real, but the experience in Holmes County, Ohio, definitely, I gained a lot of experience from that. And it gave me a better perspective on how to protect myself when I, was at 225th Street.
The only question that I have, though, is that if it did make you that much stronger and that much more aware of it, how come it wasn't more on your radar when you started the process of purchasing 225th Street?
You know what? That is a good question. A couple things. These kind of spirits, evil spirits, are able to hide. They're very good at disguising themselves. They can hide and lead you to believe they're not there. But having a gift of discernment, I did not discern anything when I went into the house. And when I say a gift of discernment, I think everybody has gifts. And I think a lot of people, we're able to discern things, like, we're intuitive. We know things sometimes that are for our good and they're to protect us. And, I've had those experiences many times in my life. But in this house, it wasn't until I was actually in the house the very first night that I started wondering. I had some strange things happen. Now, part of that, I believe, is possibly because, for one thing, I was so happy to be out of the nightmare I had just endured. I was so happy that I was just convincing myself that that chapter is over. You're never going to experience that again. If you hear noises or weird things happen, it's nothing. You're not crazy. Just forget it. It's not. There's no way you could live in a haunted house twice in a row. And the other thing is, I do believe I was allowed to go through those experiences so I would share my story and help other people. I think sometimes we have to go through bad things in life to gain, a certain outlook and knowledge that we can share with others and help them. And I think that was another part of it.
Well, and also, too, the realtor didn't bother to tell you about the history of the house when you purchased it.
Yeah. The realtor who owned the house claimed that he knew, what I come to find out, not only was it haunted, but the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why, was there was a suicide in the house in the 1950s. The realtor swore that he never knew, but people in the town told me that he definitely did know. They didn't believe him. The one neighbor told me that he had spoken directly to this realtor's, the realtors under him, and that he had told her in no uncertain terms that 2 houses in the area were haunted, and that realtor owned both of them. And he told her, my neighbor had told her in no uncertain terms that they were haunted. And I think he had even mentioned a suicide to her, but the realtor firm would swear up and down they didn't know. That is what allowed me, though, to back out of purchasing the home. I was living there, waiting for my mortgage to close. The realtor was kind enough to let me move in because he was flipping the house. He bought it at a sheriff's auction, and he did some repairs and was flipping it. And he was just looking to make a profit. He figured, I'm definitely getting my mortgage. Everything will be okay. This guy wants the house.
And we just lost him.
Still there?
Still in the process of closing. And when I come to grips with what was going on in the house and the history of the house,
Yeah, I think we just lost Patrick. Matt, if you want to try and give him a call on his telephone line, we can try.
Can you hear me okay?
There we go. Yeah, it just said that the internet connection was lost. I don't know if that was on our end. Can you hear us? Hello, Patrick?
Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Okay, yeah, I think there's definitely a problem with the internet. So if you just want to give him a call on that line there, we'll just stick with that.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we're going to call you right back, Patrick, on the telephone line.
Hello?
Hi, can you hear us? This is fascinating radio. All right, why don't we just try and get him on the phone? And but Moniz, that's something that we do hear a lot. That happens where, these aren't really given to you. This information isn't given to you up front by the realtor. I mean, I know in a lot of states
it is by law now required.
Yes, it's by law required, but still, they can always go with that excuse of, well, we hadn't learned that yet.
If they know, if any type of report has been given to the realtor and they know ahead of time and do not disclose it if asked, repeat, if asked, then yes, they can be held accountable.
And we're talking about if there's been a murder there. In some states, you have to disclose if it's actually been accused of being haunted.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about just suicides or deaths in the place if they know. I'm talking about if they have a report of a place being haunted, whether it's been verified or not. They are obligated by law to be able to inform a prospective buyer if they are asked.
Well,
they don't have to volunteer.
The haunting law is state to state. There's only a few states that really have that in place, but I'm pretty sure the murder law is universal across the country. All right, I think we've reconnected with Patrick. Are you there, Patrick?
Yes, I'm back.
All right, sorry about that. It's just somebody's internet connection isn't strong enough to handle it, or something doesn't want us to talk to each other.
No, I'm gonna tell you something. I wanted to ask you about that because this is becoming a normal occurrence when I go on the air. These kind of things happen pretty much every show anymore. Most of the time, there's no explanation for why it happens. I believe it is because I'm not shy about saying what I came up against was demonic. And I'm not shy about, sharing how to fight back. And I don't think that makes them very happy. And I just say that. I've had many, this is probably the 4th show in a row that I've had things like this happen on.
Well, we've already had one exorcism, one blessing of the studio. And let's just say I don't know if it took. We were all right for a few years, but now it's starting to kick up again. So we're going to have Keith Johnson come back soon and work his magic again.
It is another 1950s board that's in here again, though. Different than the original one we started with.
That's the same board, right?
No, I don't think it is.
No.
Yeah, it's
fairly.
You may have to do that.
Well, now you were saying though that the realtor actually owned another house that was haunted, that people had accused of being haunted. So he knew this, he heard these stories, and he still chose not to share this information with you when you were prospectively buying the house.
Yeah, he swears that he did not know, but I can't. I'll take his word for it that he didn't. But I can tell you that other people told me they think he did. But that was what allowed me to back out of the purchase, was because the suicide had not been disclosed to me, and obviously, I will say the former owners had never talked to each other. None of them had shared with the other former owners that they had haunting experiences in the house. Matter of fact, none of them ever even shared with the other former owners that there was a suicide. they all pretty much wanted to sell the house, so they didn't say anything, and they sold it, and then someone else bought it and walked right into a nightmare, so that's pretty much how it went. The only former owner who did not go through that actually was the owner before me, and she endured a terrible environment, terrible experiences, and she had actually lost the house.
Well, what I thought was the most interesting is that when you started researching the history of it and you started contacting former residents of the house, you were finding out that not only were they having experiences, but they were having similar experiences to what was happening to you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, multiple experiences from multiple people of a hooded figure. My experience with it, I actually did see its face. I had a vision early on in the house, and again, I believe that goes back to the having a gift of discernment. But I have to say it was a vision because it just came out of nowhere, and it was in my mind's eye. On a night after I found that my bed had moved by itself, and there was no explanation for how the bed moved. I convinced myself that my cousin must have done it earlier that day, and I just thought, I'm going to ask him tomorrow, and he'll say, oh, yeah, I did. I'm sorry, I forgot to put it back. So I convinced myself, because I'm definitely trying to make myself not be afraid and not think there could be something in this house. Like who in the world could have 2 haunted houses in a row? And so I convinced myself there was an explanation for the bed moving. And then that night when I went, just a few minutes after I found the bed was moved and straightened it and went to bed, I had a vision of my staircase, and I could see a hooded, it was a very crystal clear vision. Very vivid colors, razor sharp definition, and I could see the staircase outside my bedroom door, and there was a hooded figure coming up the staircase. And it looked like a very skinny old man. He was slightly round-shouldered. He had his head down. He had a very sinister grin on his face. As I, researched more of the house, that had a definite connection to the suicide. It was not the gentleman who had committed suicide, though, but I believe it was something that was there. It probably drove him to do it. I believe it was an evil spirit that probably tormented him as well. But multiple accounts of these hooded figures in the house with different people who had lived there. Multiple accounts of a shadow person that was about 7 feet tall. That was experienced by, my goodness, the former owner before me saw it multiple times. My mother saw it in the kitchen of the house. It walked past her real fast from the dining area towards the back bedroom. And my girlfriend actually experienced it in the house as well when we were in the kitchen one day. So there were lots of things like that repeated. They happened over and over while I was there.
That's one of the things that was coming up in the chat room, when we started talking with you, is people are wondering, you hear that somebody lived in back-to-back haunted places, back-to-back possible demonic infestations, and the first logic is that, oh, well, it must be following him from one to the other. But that's what's important, is that it was the prior residents who were experiencing the same thing. So whatever it was there was bothering them, harassing them before you had even entered the picture.
Definitely. And you know what that is, the rational question. It's only reasonable to assume, did something follow him from the past house he was in? And I knew it didn't immediately because I knew that first experience had ended in a very successful exorcism of that house and property. Mm-hmm. So I was very confident nothing followed me, but as it turned out, like you said, the hauntings at 225th Street were going on long before I was there, probably long before I was even born.
And just in this is of course purely speculative on your part here, but do you feel like there's those negative forces that were there that actually caused that suicide to happen, or do you think they're the result of that suicide that happened in 1954?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think I know more about what all led up to the suicide, but I cannot disclose it because I can't prove it. That's something I believe I am discerning. But either way, clearly the gentleman who killed himself was a tormented individual. He was an extreme perfectionist. He had actually built the house in the 1920s, 1924. He was like, I believe this is part of a curse, in my opinion. He was so much a perfectionist that he built the whole house 2 rows of brick thick. He double bricked the entire house. That's what you normally would see on like a commercial building. You would not see that on a home normally. And everything he did, it had to be exact. And that drove him crazy too. I think there was more going on than that. But I believe there were spirits in that house before he ever did that, before he ever committed suicide.
I almost wonder if he was tormented enough by them that's why he had to take his own life, because it was the only way to kind of free himself from them. Again, purely speculation.
Yeah, it is speculation. And I will say this, if you're a perfectionist to that point, not only are you, that's very close to, in reality, being self-condemning as well, because nothing that you do is even good enough. If you're that much of a perfectionist, nothing is ever good enough. And it is, it could easily make a person start feeling self-condemnation that nothing they do is good enough, and that could spiral into, all kinds of issues. I think that played a part of it, definitely.
So as you're researching this and you're finding out more of the history of the house, are you instantly thinking in your head that you have to conduct another exorcism, or is that something that you're hoping is a last resort type of approach?
No, I pretty much, I'll tell you, when my neighbor came over one day, I'd had several experiences. And my neighbor, in the book, I did change the names of the people in the book because I respect these people and they're good people. And I realized, I didn't change my own name. I potentially could be called a nut, crazy and everything else. But I changed their names out of respect to them. But the gentleman I called Steve, he was my neighbor. He came over one day and he shared some good news with me about how helpful everyone in the community was. And if I needed any help with anything, just let somebody know. And I thanked him. And he said, well, that's the good news. Now for the bad news. And I knew immediately. When he said that, I knew exactly what he was going to say. And I interjected. I said, you're going to tell me my house is haunted. And his eyes got big, his mouth dropped open, and he said, yeah, man, your house is haunted. He said, some dude killed himself in your basement a long time ago. And at that point, I pretty much knew it. And I was like, I knew it. I've been downplaying all these little things that have been happening, but I knew it. And so I started researching, started contacting the other former owners, and I got enough information early on, even from, just the first family that lived there, that I knew an exorcism had to be done. And we attempted an exorcism on the house, and the exorcism was not successful. And there's reasons for that, and that's the one thing I think I'm sorry to say, I believe most of the church today is asleep at the wheel. They are not doing what the church is called to do. And the people that even believe most of the time in the church that believe in exorcism, they assume that if you just say in Jesus' name, come out or leave or whatever, the demons immediately flee. And the reality is, that's dependent upon why they're there in the first place. And in the situation with 225th Street, there were reasons, there were strongholds in that house, and there were things that were keeping them there. And therefore, the exorcism was not successful. And I later, through more research, determined several reasons why I believe the exorcism was unsuccessful. But very strange things happened during the attempted exorcism. One of the least of the things that happened was that everybody, when we were done, I can't say if the house itself had actually dropped, if the temperature had actually dropped, or if it was all of us. But I know when spirits manifest, that a lot of times people feel cold, and sometimes it's the actual temperature drops, and sometimes it's that the people just feel cold because the spirits are drawing heat energy away from their bodies. Mm-hmm. And I don't know which it was, but we all agreed it felt like it was a bone-chilling cold inside that house. I mean, it was frigid, and we all experienced that night after we attempted the exorcism, and multiple experiences while we tried to do the exorcism as well.
And did that exorcism make things worse?
I think it stayed about the same, because I think what the spirits in that house found out early on, probably even within the first day of me being there, was this guy is not like the other people. Mm-hmm. He knows something. Because I knew even just the way I would pray when I started getting creeped out is not how most people would even pray, and I think they knew early on. But that night, when we attempted the exorcism, we all were in agreement that what was there was kind of like on the ropes. We had them on the run, but they did not have to leave. And so, therefore, they didn't. And I think, if anything, they knew, we don't want this idiot here. I think the spirits were more like, we want him just to leave, and before he figures out how to get rid of us for good. And I wouldn't say it got worse. I would say it continued. Now, I may have been protected from other things because other people that lived there were very strange deaths. There was one death in particular that I believe was completely linked to the house. There was an accident. I actually think that individual's stepfather also died while he lived there. He did die of natural causes, but he had been tormented while he lived there, and it turned out he was bleeding internally and didn't even know it, and that's what led to his death. The woman who lived there before me, she thought that the entities in the house were trying to kill her on multiple occasions.
Wow.
She had very strange experiences, including a gas valve in the basement was opened wide open. And when I say that, I shouldn't say it was opened wide open. It was open enough that the house filled with gas. The whole house was full of gas. Her son, who had just died after moving into the house, his fiance was there with her, and they both started smelling. They didn't know what they were smelling. They smelled fumes. And the fiance, went looking to try to find out where it was coming from, and found that that valve in the basement had been opened. The woman that happened to was on oxygen, so she didn't even smell the gas. I mean, it was completely full. The house was full of gas, and she didn't even realize it because she was breathing oxygen. And she also had multiple experiences where she felt that, the spirits, while she slept, had manipulated her oxygen in an attempt to, at the very least, to scare her, and possibly worse, to kill her.
Just sounds more and more like this place needs to be burned down and turned into a parking lot.
I'll tell you, I do feel like it's the entire... I know what room the suicide happened in. I know there's some strong legal rights in that room for the spirits to stay, but I do believe it's like the entire house is defiled, because there are experiences throughout the entire house.
Now, did you find that this was this more intense, or was it not as bad as the first home that you lived in?
It was different. It's hard to explain. The first haunting I experienced was due more to really old curses and also some witchcraft that was being practiced against me. And, a lot of people will say right away, well, you're a Christian. Witchcraft won't work against a Christian. That's crazy, Well, here's the reality. In that environment I endured in the first house in Holmes County, Ohio, all a Satanist or a witch or whatever, if you want to try to curse somebody and okay, they're a Christian, so I don't know if this curse is going to work or not. The main thing you have to do is get them to be involved in some kind of sin, and as soon as you do that, the door is flung wide open and the curses work. The big thing for me was dealing with forgiveness issues, because I started realizing what the people in that community were doing, and I also I believe that house played a part in me losing my marriage. I ended up going through a divorce during that time, which was extremely traumatic. So there's all these issues that I was dealing with on top of the paranormal, and those are issues it's very easy to hold unforgiveness. As soon as you do that, if they're cursing you, it's going to work. So that haunting was very different. Both of them were demonic in origin, but that was a very different style haunting than 225th Street. Both of them had extremely terrifying, I've had encounters that are just terrifying, When I tell people about some of my experiences sometimes, I'll be talking to them, and it's kind of just matter of fact to me. I've already lived through it, and I've experienced it, and I understand it. And I kind of forget that they never have. And I'll be telling somebody, and all of a sudden I'm looking at them, and they just look terrified, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you.
Just another night for me, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, see, you guys have experienced that stuff, so you kind of know where I'm coming from with that. But the average person who has not, it is terrifying. And it's terrifying for me. I don't ever care to deal with that stuff again, But the hauntings were very different, and it was just because the doors that had been opened in each situation were very different. So there were different types of demonic spirits there. So it was kind of, that allowed the hauntings to be very different.
Well, you mentioned the demonic, though, being tied into both, and what makes it so that you're convinced that it definitely is something demonic and not just some sort of negative, formerly human entity?
Well, as far as with the Holmes County incident, I know what I found out right before we performed the successful exorcism. Now, number one, the exorcism was successful, and I believe that's pretty good indication because we were going after demons when we did the exorcism in that situation. But I was able to narrow down that problem was coming from a curse that had been placed on that ground in the 1790s after the Greenville Treaty. And I lived not far from the treaty line. And what I had found out was that that ground had been cursed by the Indians because they had to give it up. And that started the curse. So there was like a combination of an ancient curse, and when I say ancient, a couple hundred years, in American history, that's ancient. And then also the people in that community, it was an Amish community. And most people think the Amish are, God-fearing Christian people. And if you really get into what they believe and what they practice, it is not. And that is, I had two different attacks coming against me. Both were, I consider demonic because one's coming from a curse, the other one is coming from curses from modern day witchcraft that was being practiced at that time. In 225th Street, I knew, it was like I discerned very clearly that this is something demonic. And, with the hooded figures and shadow people, like tall shadow people, I saw a black mass at one point in the house. I mean, I think that all lends itself very, very heavily to the demonic origin theory, I believe it wholeheartedly that it was, what I was experiencing there was all demonic.
Sure. There's a couple questions from the chat room on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. One of the questions is, you had mentioned about the Amish and not being what we think that it is. What do you think the Amish are?
Okay, they are a religious group. They do use a Bible, but they mix, and this is what I will be getting into. I'll tell you up front, Nightmare in Holmes County will be controversial, but I will back up every one of my claims with documentation. They practice a form of witchcraft known as powwow, which has elements of the Bible in it mixed with Indian witchcraft and Old World witchcraft from Germany. And so they may say, do something in the name of the Trinity or something like that. But at the same time, they're doing that while they're using witchcraft curses and charming and casting spells and things like that. That is rampant in the Amish community. So in my opinion, after living there for 8 years, they are a cult. And in my opinion, after living there 8 years, I believe they're a demonic cult. The basic elements of Christianity they do not believe, they do not adhere to, but they do use a Bible. So it is misleading. But I've talked to many people who formerly were Amish, and they've told me everything that they've said. I don't know where you got your information, but you're right. Whoever told you that, it's true. And a lot of it was what I just discerned at first, and then when I would talk to more people that were former Amish, they would tell me, yes, that's all true. I experienced all those things when I was Amish. There are several places I know of in Holmes County that I'm aware of where Satanism is practiced, various forms of witchcraft are practiced. I have pictures that will be in that book, in Nightmare in Holmes County, of animal sacrifices that I found, where a dead dog hanging from a tree by its feet in one of the places where they have these ceremonies. I found in that same area, I found a steer skull hanging from a tree about a year earlier. So they are definitely into some very dark religious practices.
Well, you said that book was going to cause a lot of controversy. It's already causing a lot of controversy in the chat room from some of the loyal followers in there who are just amazed at some of the claims that you're making. So we'll have to talk about that part more when Nightmare in Holmes County comes out in 2012. But because basically we're running short on time here tonight, and I know that we're opening a door there that's going to take a lot of time to really get into the meat of the matter. But another question that came in the chat room was somebody wanted to know if when you conducted these exorcisms, if you felt the need to have someone from the clergy present, or if you felt that your belief was strong enough to carry out the exorcism.
I don't think it's ever a bad idea to have a minister involved. I don't think that's ever a bad idea, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary either. In the Great Commission, in the book of Mark in the Bible, Jesus, right, one of the last things he talked about before he ascended to heaven was that, those who believe in his name will cast out demons. And that goes for, if you've repented of your sins and accepted him as your Savior, you at that point have authority over unclean spirits. So, it's obviously a minister is a spiritual leader, so that's definitely a good idea if they're willing to help you, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I will say sometimes, in fact, pretty much all the time, it's a good idea to have as many people that share your beliefs praying in agreement with you when you're doing an exorcism, because there's more power in that, But I don't think you necessarily have to have a ordained minister or clergy present.
What about somebody of a different faith that's going for the same objective?
I wouldn't, and the reason I say that is, and everything I do like this, and I've done exorcisms on people and on places and that, I'm always addressing this in Jesus' name. And so from that perspective, that's where I'm drawing my strength. No spirit ever has to listen to me because I said it. They have to listen to it because I said it to the authority that he gave me when I accepted him as my Savior. So when I say that, I'm putting all my eggs in his basket, basically. That's where I'm going to have the authority to fight back, and I don't believe I need to involve any other religious systems.
But say you were going to help another person that is of a different faith. That's why I'm asking the question.
Yes.
Suppose
Yes.
you went to somebody that's, having a problem with a demonic infestation and they're, say, Jewish. Would you be opposed to having a rabbi there?
They could be present, but I think the person would see through the, if you stuck it out and got to the bottom of what was going on with the infestation, I think the person would clearly see that there is authority in Jesus' name, and you know what? Maybe I should think about that. Maybe I should consider that. But I will tell you, the Jewish people do have a deep belief in these spirits.
How well I know.
They were very accurate in what they believed. Even with the demoniac that had thousands of demons in him that went into the pigs in the Bible.
Not to mention Jesus was a Jew. One of those things.
Absolutely. And I do believe that I'm on board fully with the Jewish people. Believe me, I'm always going to, anything I do in the spiritual realm, I'm going to do it through Jesus' name, because like I said, nothing has to ever listen to me because I said it. I have to say it through His authority.
All right. Well, we are coming up on the end of the show, but again, the book is called 225th Street, and the forthcoming prequel is called Nightmare in Holmes County. You can get the first one from crownofthornspublishing.com, and of course the second one will be up there as soon as it's available. And you can also get the Kindle version at amazon.com. And I have to say, though, by getting this story out, I think a lot more people are going to realize that they may have encountered spirits in their house, but the people that I'm worried about are those who move into 225th Street in the ensuing years. Have you had any contact with the current residents?
Yes, I did. The realtor sold them the house, and he had to tell them, because it got out that what I was saying, and he had to tell them. So he told them that there was a suicide and that there were reports of the house being haunted, but he did it in a manner that made me look crazy. So they bought the house and moved in. Interestingly enough, in their first 6 months in the house, they called the police 3 times themselves. Now, what they called for was things would disappear. It would appear someone broke into their car, or their house, or their garage, or their car, or stole their credit cards, or whatever. And they're always unsolved. The crimes always remain unsolved. That is part of the history of the house. When you live in that house, your stuff gets stolen. You never really know who did it. All kinds of weird situations like that happen, along with the full-on paranormal experiences as well. So I think whether they know it or not, there's still stuff there.
Well, I can tell you've definitely started a lot of controversy in the chat room. They're planning on hanging around and discussing it more after the show goes off the air in a few minutes. So if you want to jump into the chat room on Spooky TV, Patrick, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts with them there. But okay. we are coming up on the end of the program, but we will be back next week. We're going to talk about some Halloween campfire stories with Jim Harold. Those of you who listen to his podcast, you know what Jim's all about, and he's got a new book out about some campfire tales for Halloween. And I promise this time that when we say we're going to be sharing some scary stories for Halloween, I mean it. Not like the last time we promised that we were telling scary ghost stories for Halloween, and we pulled off a War of the World hoax that a lot of people definitely fell for. So,
I mean, we practically did it word for word from the old one.
And some people caught on. But a lot of people didn't until that moment when we cut right to the original War of the Worlds. So if you haven't ever checked that show out, definitely go back into the archives on SpookySouthCoast.com and check it out. Also on Wareham Radio, which is a new venture that I've started with Jay Harper. If you go to warehamradio.com, we run old-time radio ghost stories and mysteries and all kinds of things a couple nights a week. We also have old Gene Shepard shows. We have jazz. We have barbershop music. We have everything that you could possibly imagine on warehamradio.com. So definitely check that out. Because we're gonna be running something special from Cape Cod Mystery Theater coming up on Halloween, but we might also run the War of the Worlds and also the Possession of the Church, which was the old time radio drama that we did here live in the studio a few years ago. So all that's coming up on warehamradio.com. But we'll talk to you next week here on Spooky South Coast again, when our guest will be Jim Harold, and we'll talk about all things Halloween coming up. And just stay tuned to Facebook, to our website, to everything. We'll keep updating it with how the ticket sales are going for Dead of Winter, but you don't want to take too much time to get your tickets for those because they are running out fast. So until next week, for Matt Costa, for Matt Moniz, I'm Tim Weisberg. We want you
First with local news, talk, and sports. This is WBSM New Bedford, AM 1420. WBSM, a Cumulus station.
From ABC News, I'm Todd Ant. A new terror threat for Americans overseas. The U.S. Embassy in Nairobi is warning that they have credible evidence of an imminent terror attack against Westerners in Kenya. The threat may be linked to al-Shabaab, a Somali group affiliated with al-Qaeda. ABC's justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
Senior law enforcement officials and congressional leaders have told me that al-Shabaab is a real and growing threat and is thought to be able to project power outside of Somalia. The organization also, by the way, has recruited more Americans than any other division of al-Qaeda.
Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal easily coasted to a second term Saturday night, winning in a landslide election without much opposition. Evangelical conservative Christians, Iowa's most potent conservative voting bloc, were all ears Saturday night as 6 Republican presidential contenders spoke in Des Moines. Newt Gingrich, wooing the Iowa Faith and Freedom Coalition, talked abortion.
I would immediately move to defund Planned Parenthood and take that money and devote it to adoption services to create an alternative to abortion.
Libya will formally declare its liberation on Sunday, with elections expected within 8 months. The BBC's Ben Brown in Tripoli on the challenges for Libya's new leaders.
There has been plenty of infighting and arguing among Libya's transitional rulers so far, and no doubt there will be more in the months ahead. But their challenge really is to pull together now and stay together for long enough to steer this country from dictatorship to democracy.
BBC's Ben Brown. Meanwhile, men, women, and children have been lining up at a shopping center in the Libyan city of Misrata to view the blood-streaked body of Muammar Gaddafi. It's laid out on a mattress on the floor of an emptied-out vegetable freezer. And after a lengthy set of negotiations in Brussels, leaders